Money laundering was supposed to go down once AI came in to save the day, and it's gone up. Does a software-based approach catch people who are moving money illicitly? Absolutely. It catches the dumb ones. And so it doesn't catch innovation, which money launderers are some of the most innovative criminals in the world. I'm not saying we shouldn't use it. We should still catch all the people that can be caught with it. But I think switching over to understanding how...
Welcome to Cyber and Psych. Today with Stephanie and Matthew. Stephanie is the CEO of and co-founder of Norphluchs. It's a tool for GDPR compliant digital background checks and person-based risks inside. Her main expertise is in OSINT and corporate background checks. Stephanie and Matthew work together when the topic of corporate espionage arises, especially in critical infrastructure and financial institutions. Therefore, she will be assisting me today a little bit on the interviewing part when it comes to corporate espionage and insider threats. And you, Matthew, spent 13 years with the CIA and totaling 17 years in the intelligence community, especially in infiltrating Mexican cartels and transnational criminal organizations as a money launderer, as I understand that correctly.
That is true, you're correct.
Now, I'm very curious, what do you do now and what is your mission? Who are you?
So my mission now closely mirrors what it was when I was in a little bit. Now I have three main focus areas. One is I train U.S. and foreign law enforcement agencies in conducting undercover operations, specifically when it comes to money laundering or narcotics trafficking. I also consult with financial institutions, banks, and family offices to create insider threat programs and help them understand how money laundering actually works outside of an academic textbook. And finally, I work with individuals who either want personal coaching about fraud and manipulation or have been victims of, say, things like romance scams or, financial fraud. I work a lot with victims of romance scams or elderly fraud cases now as well.
Wow. And you're based in the US.
That's right.
Right?
Yes. I try to travel as much as possible, but the US is my home base. Yes.
Cool. Well, that's like really broad, what you did. So you, as I understand correctly, you went undercover. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, broadly. So in law enforcement, they typically call it going undercover. And in the intelligence world, we use a little bit different language. We say, working in cover, using a cover platform or working in alias. And, for me, I was a commercial cover officer. I was not a diplomatic cover officer like most in the intelligence community are. And so we actually use a blend where sometimes more often than people would think, we work in our true name. And then other times, for different operational reasons, we will adopt a cover identity. But it can switch back and forth more often than most people think.
How did you get into this field?
Yes, it was a little bit of a twisting road. I was looking to join the CIA straight out of college, actually. And at the time, I didn't finish college because the war in Afghanistan, the global war on terrorism had kicked off. And very naively, I thought I was going to miss my chance to participate. I didn't know it was going to last for, 200 years, and I had plenty of time. So I left and joined the U.S. military, intending to work on the military side, except that didn't work out. The military immediately sent me to work on a military billet to the National Security Agency. So I ended up in intelligence, whether I wanted to or not. And then based on some of the things I got involved in with the NSA, I was approached by someone with the CIA at the end of my military tour and asked if I would like to join a special program with them.
So you can actually just decide to be in the CIA? I was like thinking that the people, they approach you because you are, I don't know, standing out with some qualities or something.
It's much less than it used to be that way. When it started, when it switched from the OSS to the CIA after World War II, it was very much that they were directly going out and looking for people. Now,
Uh-huh.
most officers apply online to
Oh, wow.
CIA.gov. And that's how most of the people get recruited for that. So you could take the test online, and then
Uh-huh.
they typically will reach out to you if your application package is desirable for them, or they do more broad recruitments on college campuses as well, where they'll actually have a booth that says CIA on it. It's not very secret at all, so it's not as spooky as most people think for that.
So did
Not like in
did
the movies.
the image change? Did the image change from like a few years ago to now? Like, was it all? Because you said it wasn't always like that, and here in Europe, it's definitely not like that.
No, no, it's much more, let's say, delicate in Europe than it is here, and uh, I think at the time when I was coming on, they were getting 50,000 applicants a month. I mean, lots of people,
Hmm.
try to join, and most people don't understand what an intelligence service is looking for because
Hmm.
movies have so construed what an
Yes.
intelligence officer is that most people don't understand the personality type and what we would refer to as being suitable, for this type of
Hmm.
work, what that psychological makeup is. And so they have
Yeah.
to weed through a great number of applicants that are just not right for the job.
Yeah, you mentioned the desirable package.
Yes.
What would be the desirable package that someone brings to do this?
Yes. So I'll talk broadly because I don't want to necessarily give
Okay.
any
Sure.
adversaries the
Yeah.
exact sweet spot of
Okay.
what someone would
Sure.
want to look like. But in general, aside from a psychological makeup that makes somebody suitable for this, which is probably the most important thing, and that is sensitive information, what that psychology would be. But they're also looking for someone who travels the world, has an interest in the world, has a generally a master's degree for this type of job, who speaks as many languages as possible,
Mm.
and has demonstrated an interest in the world outside of the United States. It's uh, This job is not done domestically, typically. There are a few
Yeah.
exceptions, but
True.
we're looking for people who want to be doing the types of things that would, comprise the job overseas. We
Mhm.
don't want people who are not curious. One of the things that is looked or asked is, how much have you read about us? How many books have you looked into? And
Mhm.
one of the I have maybe dozens of people a week ask me through LinkedIn specifically, how do I join? How do I get in? And I'll
Yeah.
tell them to read and research, what's already out there about intelligence, because if you want to be someone who collects information for a living and are a curious
Mhm.
person, um, you should be someone who takes advantage of free information that's at your disposal, that's out there about the life that you want to have. So we make sure that people aren't just pretending to have the qualities that we want, are actually living that way.
That means you are very good at training yourself in different fields.
Yes, I would say that being someone who is a good learner is
Yes.
paramount, and someone who can take what they're being taught and extrapolate on it, and apply it to different things. There are so many
Mm.
scenarios in this line of work that you're going to encounter that you can't be trained for every single little one of them. You have to be someone who understands a core concept and then can apply it to whatever situation
Yeah.
comes up.
I heard in another podcast someone who was a spy telling the podcaster about that he was recruited because he was also interesting for the CIA because he had traits of maybe a bit of psychopathic, not psychopathic really, but he was able to lie, basically.
You might be
Is that
referring
something
to
that you
Jim
have to be?
Lawler.
That's possible.
I know
I
he
don't
was
remember
referred
his name.
to when he did a podcast with Julian Dory. I think they labeled it the CIA's sociopath or something like that. But
Yes.
Jim
Is
is
that
a
like
legend.
myth? Okay.
It is a little bit. First off, Jim is one of the most successful officers that is still alive that we've ever
Oh,
had.
okay.
He's a great person and extremely intelligent and
Mhm.
a hero in our world. But I think that it doesn't have to be that way. And some of the most successful intelligence officers that I've ever seen are extremely empathetic because
Mhm.
being able to relate to people,
Yeah.
which is something that Jim is amazing at, it's paramount. People don't like taking risks or selling secrets to people that they don't have anything in common with or that they feel
Mhm.
despise them or don't like them. Finding common ground with people is one of the basic principles of doing intelligence
Mhm.
work.
Yeah, I think they mentioned that too.
Hmm.
To get them or to l- give them a reason to give you information.
Absolutely. People when they're taking these massive risks, right? Because they could get thrown in
Uh-huh.
prison, they could, their families in some countries could be killed if they were caught. Um, we have discovered over a very long period of time that people are more likely to do that with somebody that they like than with
Okay.
somebody that they don't. And being likable and relating to people has a lot to do with this naturally.
Then that's more of an important trait than to be able to lie or yeah, just invent some stories.
I think it depends on what your job in intelligence is.
Hmm.
Whereas somebody like Jim was a spy recruiter, that's what he did. Not
Yeah.
so much for me. And um,
Mm.
being able to lie was much more a part of my job
Mm.
because it wasn't just recruiting people to give information. I was trying to gain access to uh, transnational organized crime groups.
Yeah.
And so lying was definitely a big part of my day to day.
So how does it work if you're on the one side extremely empathetic and on the other side being forced to lie? Because you have your mission, your goal, so you know you have to lie to reach that goal. But on the other hand, you're dealing with people that you might get involved with. And if you're an empathetic person, I think it's a fine line to balance, right?
It is. And when you work in cover, I've heard it referred to like acting a lot of times, which is a horrible comparison, unless it's method acting that we're talking about. You want to believe what you're doing. You have to believe what
Hmm.
you're doing, or else people will notice that you're being disingenuine with them. And the relationships, especially when you are uh, involved with some of these groups and their families, like I was for a very long period of time, for years, you make relationships that are real. They are not fake.
Okay.
And when those relationships end, um, you feel the same way as if a normal person's relationship with someone they cared about ends. It's the same. And sometimes you love people. Sometimes you get very close to people's children, and that can be extremely psychologically impactful when it's over, or along the way when you know that in your head, this is not going to end perfectly. And it will end
Hmm.
at some point. This isn't a relationship I'll be able to have forever. And it's a burden to carry. It should be a burden. It should not be easy. And it can really negatively impact people that have lived it for a very long time.
Hmm. You have to kind of separate
That's it.
the
Compartmentalize
your
is, yeah,
yes,
yes.
compartmentalize.
You do. You live multiple lives, and you have to keep
Uh-huh.
what's in that bucket over in that bucket, and what's in another one completely separate, or else you'll experience a cognitive dissonance that will make the brain very unhealthy.
So do you get like support? I guess you get training for this,
Yes.
extensive training,
Yes.
but do you also have like ongoing support during a mission?
Yes and no. So there is extensive training, and we could talk about that later if you would like. But along the way, there are multiple types of support. One is you routinely meet with psychologists and psychiatrists that the organization provides you, and also what the media would refer to as my handler, my boss, who I reported to, acted as a therapist, parental figure, a friend, a psychologist the entire time, because that's the only person who knows the truth about you, and you create a very strong bond with that person, and sometimes maybe to a large extent use them as a shoulder to cry on as a therapist and your only emotional outlet. That's true. So that support for me, I was very lucky. The person I reported to was an amazing person, is an amazing person. They're still working. And that was, without that, I don't think I would have been able to do it for as long as I did.
You mentioned the training. Can you tell us about the training? And what I would be most interested in is like what that teaches us to spot maybe manipulators in our lives or in the corporate life, for example.
Yes. So I'll try to make this not a 10-hour answer because there's so much that went into this part of the training specifically. Because I was a commercial cover officer, or what's referred to as a non-official cover, or NOC is what they call it, I had a very different training than 98% of the rest of my fellow officers. And mine was done mostly one-on-one. And they would bring different instructors in to talk to me about different topics that they were experts in. I had a series of psychologists come through to talk about deception, lying, things like that. And even at one point, someone who had been a professional con man before was brought to talk to me. And so I'll break it down a little bit. The first thing is you try to avoid lying at all costs. And unlike the movies, we try to make the story true. A good cover is a true cover. And so less goes into lying than it does building a platform to where what you're saying and living can be true. The next thing that they discuss is how to avoid being asked a question you have to lie to in the first place. And so steering a conversation away from someone asking you the questions you don't want to have to lie to is a skill as well. That's a conversational manipulation skill. And a lot of times you can simply create an environment where somebody would feel rude to ask you certain questions, and implying that politeness is a tool that can be used to avoid certain questions. But when you're actually being taught to lie, one of the first things they do is they sit you down and film you. They record you answering a series of questions, and they say, we want you to try to lie to certain questions, tell the truth to other questions. You're the only one who's going to know which ones are true and which ones are a lie. And then they take you into another room with a large screen, and they show you what you look like when you're lying. And it's something that most people are not aware of. They have an idea of what they come across as when they're lying, but they don't know. And so once you understand the difference between what you look like when you're lying and when you're telling the truth, you can start to manipulate the process to match when you're telling the truth. One thing that is a massive mistake, even people who work undercover make all the time, is they put a lot of effort into telling a lie. And then they don't put any effort into telling the truth. It just comes naturally, and it flows. And so that's problematic for two reasons. One, you can simply tell somebody is lying because they put so much effort into doing it. But two, when you're trying to lie, a lot of it is based off of creating a reality for the person you're lying to that they wish existed instead of the truth. You're making a mismatch between their perception of what is real and what is actually real by giving their brain a more comfortable place to live in than reality. And the problem when you're only focusing on the lies and not the truth is many times people will think that when you're telling the truth, you're lying all of a sudden because there's this difference. This has happened to me when I've been working before. Early on, I learned this lesson the hard way, where I knew I was going to be asked. I was in a room, and there were several senior figures from a European organized crime group in the room. And when I walked in, it was in a bar. Somebody had taken my cell phone from me that worked for them, and they were going to look through my cell phone while I was in the room. And I knew there were certain questions I was going to get asked. I knew it. And I was ready. I had rehearsed this in my head, hundreds of times. I looked in the mirror, I was ready to go. And I breezed through these questions. And then they asked me a few questions I don't have to lie to. And I could tell immediately on their face, they thought I was being deceitful. Oh. And I wanted to say, no, that's not even the question I'm lying to. I was lying to the question you asked me 2 minutes ago. This is the truth. But you can't do that. And so good liars are consistent in their delivery. They're very
because
consistent.
You have like tells, right?
Right.
Because afterwards you were like thinking about it, and before you just breezed through, and then they probably saw a difference, but
right. You relax once you're done telling a lie, and you see that people believe it. It's almost like okay, I got past that test, and so that's a big tell. One of the ways that they teach us to lie is through the lens of how a magician works. And the first thing to understand about how a magician lies is that that's right. And the misdirection is based off of how you're being perceived, where the audience. So if it was a physical form of a magic trick, where the audience is sitting is extremely important. That's their perception angle on you. If they're standing over your shoulder, they might see, how the trick is done. And so understanding the perception, what angle somebody is observing you from when you're lying is extremely, extremely important. The second thing is to understand that people like being deceived. There's a great quote, I believe it's by John Locke, which is, it's vain to find fault in the methods of deception wherein people so enjoy being deceived. So again, looking at magic, people will pay money to go to a magic show, right?
That's so true.
They're literally paying money for someone to lie to them and to trick them as a form of entertainment. Because again, people would like to replace reality. The brain is always looking to replace reality with something it likes more. And that is the best way to lie to someone, is to provide them with that alternate reality that is more comfortable for their brain.
And that's also how scams work, because that's like what the people hope the reality would be.
Exactly.
And then they are deceived by it. That's interesting. Were you surprised in the beginning when you saw the first time your recording how bad you were at lying, or were you good already?
Very natural.
I was horrible. I was absolutely.
Because I would be so bad if someone recorded me. I would be like, oh my God.
I was actually incredibly horrible. It was painful to watch myself. I was so embarrassed because it was so obvious, and it wasn't what I thought. In the spy world, we have a commandment that is know thyself. It's very hard to pretend to be someone else if you don't actually know who you are. It's hard to adjust something when you don't have a good baseline for what it is. And understanding how people perceive you, not how you
Yeah.
you used to think that they do, but how they truly perceive you is critical in deceiving someone, or else you're going to be off.
That's really interesting. But how did you find out, or just through those recordings, or also through talking to those psychologists and experts?
It was a
Did they
constant.
tell you?
They did. They did. I had people that would sit there and have a conversation and say, "Okay, time out. This is how I know that was a lie. Fix that."
Okay.
Also, here's how I know that was the truth. And then let's say if it's a body language expression, once you identify what someone, because it's different for everyone, there's not one hard rule that works. And so I can explain it like this. When you're learning to tell if someone is being deceitful, you establish a baseline of what normal looks like for them. And then you're looking for a deviation from that baseline. When you're trying to lie someone, it's exactly the opposite. You're establishing a baseline of what the truth looks like until they notice it. And then once they have that in their head of what it looks like when they're hearing the truth from you, you simply mask the lie with those exact tonalities, the voice, the cadence of the voice, the body position. You purposely put on the truth,
Yes.
and it becomes very easy.
Oh, that's interesting. And you mentioned steering. Is that something that you said to avoid that they ask questions that you don't want to answer or having asked? How do you steer the people, or can I spot that if someone wants to manipulate me, that they are steering me now?
Yeah. So one of the most common things is I want to move the conversation in such a direction. If I feel like you're close to asking me something I don't want to answer, I'm going to move the conversation away from that topic in such a way that for you to what we call circle back to that point of the conversation would seem rude or obvious. If we get off topic, I'm sure you know this hosting these podcasts all the time. When you're trying to bring it back onto topic, sometimes it can be awkward, but it's at least noticeable. So if somebody is trying to elicit or steal information from me and I'm steering away, and then the conversation naturally goes somewhere else, but they keep circling back to this topic, then I know that that's the topic that they're trying to get information out of me on. And so I'm going to try to make that as difficult and specifically as rude as possible for them to do.
And how do you do that? Like, are you saying something special, or how is that?
You can plant
I-
seeds along the way, or one of the things that I like to use is to transfer it or to give, let's say, an example. So if you were going to ask me about, let's say, my younger brother, which I get asked about on podcasts quite a bit, and I didn't want to go down that road, I didn't want to talk about it at first, I could bring up naturally in the conversation at some point how, how rude it is when people dive into people's family lives and things like that. Right.
Okay.
And after I've said that, 3 minutes later, you can't do it. I've already, I've subtly, not so subtly, hinted that would be socially untoward of you to do. And so you can essentially teach somebody ahead of time, if you were to do this, that would be bad. And then they naturally avoid doing it.
Oh, interesting. Cool. Now I learned something. What I also wondered about was some scam victims told me that the person who manipulated them mirrored themselves very much. So they like emphasized same traits they have. They are very family oriented or something. Is that also something that is in your toolbox? Is that something that you do consciously when you want to manipulate someone?
In the beginning, it's conscious. You get so used to doing it that it becomes subconscious. And mirroring would be part of what we categorize as building rapport with someone else. It's just one part of building rapport, which for somebody in espionage or a con man or a scammer, it's essential. It is one of the building blocks of trust. And so mirroring is a tool that is used in many, many ways. Physical mirroring is the one that's talked about the most. If somebody leans in, you lean in a little bit, or if they cross their legs, you do it. It can be overdone. It can really be overdone. And for somebody who's good at spotting deception, it's an obvious tell. If somebody starts mirroring me physically, I know that they're either very suggestible because they don't know they're doing it. They're actually subconsciously following me, or they're out to get you. I teach, I do a keynote speech on deception for companies, and it's a topic that we spend a lot of time on. The other ways are in vocal tone, rhythm of how you're speaking. You can do it in emails. If somebody emails you and they're very formal in their email, my dearest Jill, comma, and then they have a long body and they most sincerely yours at the end. You can mirror that back in the formality of it. Or if they're casual, hey, what's up? Deuces.
That's exactly what I wanted to bring up. Like, I noticed that I'm doing this naturally. Like I would start like writing as myself. But if I get like an answer where he doesn't say like "Dear Stephanie" or he doesn't say greetings, I'm more prone to also just reply with a sentence, or the other way around. And I'm always like thinking, is this normal? Like, does everybody do that, or should I stick to my style? Because I do this automatically.
Yeah, me too.
I think you should stick to it. I think, Stephanie, you're somebody that's very adept at building relationships, especially early on. And I think that's one of the reasons for it. It demonstrates not only similarity, right? Because, and you go back to one of the things that you said, Jill, is what you're trying to establish, or what somebody who's trying to manipulate you is trying to establish, is the idea that we call it's a innate primate thing for people, where it's you, me, same, right? We're alike, and that means that you can trust me, because people are much more likely to trust someone they find similar to them than dissimilar to them. It's just the truth.
That's the way we are. Yeah.
What are other ways that some scammers are using in their deception toolbox, as to say?
Yeah, so scams haven't changed really in the past 100 years. These old school con man scams like the Spanish prisoner, they're just called different things now. And the psychological areas of the brain that are focused on are exactly the same. We have AI now, we have computers now, we have all of these things, but the human brain hasn't changed. If anything, it's gotten lazier than it used to be, and more easily manipulated, but it still has the same inherent weaknesses, which are all based on the brain's desire to feel safe and to perform efficiently. And when you're lying to someone or manipulating someone, you are looking for the areas of the brain that do not work efficiently, and you're exploiting those. One example that is consistently used is implied authority. People respond to people they think are authority figures. We know that if you wear a lab coat into something, people think you're an authority figure. If you express that, people naturally feel like they need to obey, and they're much less likely to challenge what you're saying. Another one that goes along with that is an implied sense of urgency. The faster the brain thinks, the worse the brain thinks. And so you want someone's decision-making process to feel rushed. It's pretty simple.
Yes. Yeah. That's like the persuasion principles.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you for the information. That's really useful. Yeah, to spot or to recognize manipulation, I guess. We mentioned also like the crime or the stuff that can happen inside of a corporate. And also maybe some deception or some insider, I don't know, steal some money from a corporate. Is there also some, or are there signs that we can spot that they maybe are deceptive or doing something that they shouldn't?
Yes, absolutely. And, I'm going to stay away from the computer-based analysis of this and talk mostly about the human side of what to look for,
Yeah.
because I think it's really what is most vulnerable now, because so much trust is being put on a computer to do this job for us. But the first thing I think of when I approach this is, how does the adversary of the company, whether that's a nation state that's trying to get someone to work at the company, whether that's somebody who's trying to get someone that works at the company to steal information, an insider threat, and give it to them, or in a financial institution, talk a banker into helping them launder money. The process is the same way that we in espionage recruit spies, or infiltrate an organization. Criminal groups understand this inherently. There are Mexican cartels who were formerly made up of special operations and intelligence officers in the Mexican government before. So it's not like they don't understand these techniques that are used. And so I always think of it, if I was going to go into that bank, or I was going to go into that company, who would I target? Those are the most vulnerable people. It's very predatory. The adversary goes after the slowest gazelle in the herd, or people who show that they are suitable to be recruited to hurt the company or to hurt the bank. And the starting point for that is, you don't recruit happy people, right? You recruit people that have a grudge, or people that feel like they're being overlooked, unseen, mistreated, undervalued. And so the first thing that I look for are people who demonstrate that they feel that way about the company that they work in. And
How do you find that?
Well, a lot of times they will have gone through a process of trying to be seen, to try to reach out. They've complained before. They've, demonstrated that they felt upset that they didn't get that promotion, or that they didn't get to work on a special project. People are usually complainers at some point along the process, saying, hey, see me, care about me. What happens when the company doesn't care about that employee, or doesn't put that attention into them? Then it's just a matter of time before somebody else in a nefarious way comes along and gives them what they're looking for and meets that need.
Yeah. So as soon as they don't complain anymore, it's not a good sign.
It's not a good sign. If you didn't fix
And
the
they
problem.
are even yes.
And suddenly it's all.
Or if the problem is fixed, of course, but if it's not fixed and they are still quiet, then that means they either are recruited or something, or they have decided to do something about it.
Right. And
I think also here, like also in this is a useful source, right? Either they go on Reddit or some other forums and start complaining with thinking they're anonymous, but you can easily find out what's the email address behind it and who's the person behind it. Or also like people who are in financial distress. So if you see like they got a divorce, they have a mortgage, they have to pay, etc. So I guess it's very easy for the CIA to spot who exactly you want to reach out for.
That's a great point. Here we have, I don't know if it's in Europe or not, a website called Glassdoor, where you can essentially, supposedly anonymously, complain about your boss. And a lot of times when I've gone into companies and looked at, the insider threat situation that they have. The company's not even aware, even on something like Glassdoor, that those people have been complaining, and saying they have this problem for a long time. There are other people, people who are trying to recruit an insider in the company. They definitely pay attention when people are expressing these vulnerabilities online.
Yeah.
And, Stephanie, you mentioned something really good about like money problems. And, historically, the CIA used an acronym called MICE to identify motivations, and why people do stuff. The first one being money, then you have ideology, coercion. And the most important thing to understand about money, and I hear this constantly. People say money is the most consistent reason that people betray a company or people betray their country. And that is just so incorrect. People don't want money. People want something they can spend money on. And whatever that is what's really important to them, right? Whatever they're going to go
So
spend.
it's more ideology.
I think, ideology is what you want the most, right? That's somebody doing something for the right reason. But if you can identify what people spend their money on, then you can understand them much more effectively than just saying people, they do it for money. They don't need the money. They're going to spend it on something that is what's actually important to them. And so you often don't even need to give them that much money as long as you're solving that underlying problem for them. Whether that's, they're going to spend it on a child that needs medical attention. That's what's more important.
So what should companies then do if they see like an employee is complaining, or like should they take action immediately? Because it also goes into their privacy, right? So they cannot just, the security department cannot just show up and say like, yeah, we've seen this and that, especially not in Europe. So what would your advice be for them to do?
So I think, the first step is to canvas how the entire company feels about things. You need to keep a good temperature check on how your employees are feeling. Are they generally feeling positive about the leadership of the company, the direction of the company? Or what you're asking them to do, does it align with helping to be defensive? I'll give an example of this in banking. Often banks are very misaligned in what they ask their frontline employees to do, such as the tellers or branch managers, with protecting the bank from money laundering. A specific example of that would be when you have quotas for opening accounts, and you have tellers or branch managers who have to hit certain number of accounts to hit a goal or to be rewarded, or sometimes they'll get fired if they don't hit it. It's a very misaligned thing to do, because if I'm a money launderer and I walk into the bank and I want to open up an account that's bad, the employee already wants me to be right, because if I win, they win. And so their motivation is more aligned with me than the bank's security at that point. So I think making sure that there's alignment there is the first step. And then, is this person's frustration shared by everyone else? Is it a frustration that the organization should actually fix? It can be a step. If that's unrealistic, then that employee may not need to work there. If they're going to end up being disgruntled by what the company is going to continue to do anyway, that there's a misalignment that needs to be addressed. And then, after that, you need to be able, and I know that there are different laws in different countries about this, but you need to keep your eye on that person, whether that's just interacting with them more, or, in places where you're allowed to actually monitor the company's systems. That's a bit different. But I think demonstrating that you're aware of them is important as well, because people don't like to do things wrong while they think they're being observed. They like to do it in the dark.
Yes. So you have to let the people know that they are observed without them feeling totally controlled.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right. And I think
how do you
yeah.
go about that?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to do it is to do it under the auspice, and not to make this disingenuous, but of actually caring about your employees, right? If you care about your employees, they're much less likely to end up in this situation in the first place if they feel like you're taking an active interest in them. But that active interest can also, when you're paying attention to somebody for a good reason, they also know that they're being paid attention to. And so
Yes.
it wins on both sides. Actually caring is the way to fix this problem on both sides of the coin.
That's so amazing that you say this, because I work in security awareness, and I always have also this point of view that if we show the people that we are interested in what they do, or if they give us some report of something that they saw in the company happening, and we take it seriously, then they know that we are here and we see the things they do or they say, and that will make the security culture so much better. But a lot of people in security awareness are more like, yeah, we just test them, and then they get like some mark in their file if they are doing badly in the tests, and then it's more like yeah, like some punishment culture.
I
So
think
yeah,
that's really
that's
well
nice you
put.
say that.
And it's very important. I don't think we could, talk about this enough, that um, creating a positive dynamic there is so
Mhm.
much more valuable than a negative one. A culture of punishment, or, in espionage, there are some services out there that will use compromising information or blackmail to recruit somebody. We steer away from this because it doesn't work. And it creates maybe initial compliance, but a long term resentment. And when you set yourself up in a company as the leadership versus the employees, and you have this negative dynamic, you're going to breed the problem that you're trying to stop. And not to get overly emotional, or touch on the emotion too much, but I do think it's an emotional topic. I spent, in my almost 20 years working in intelligence, one thing that I learned was that people all over the world, especially right now, this has become increased since I joined, feel lonely, unseen, and unheard by people
Mhm.
in their personal life and by people in their professional life. This is a massive vulnerability, that when people, and this works for, if you're married, if you're dating, at work, when people don't think they're getting their needs met, they are much more vulnerable to get their needs met by somebody else. That's just how people are. And so the best form of defense that we can take with keeping employees from getting their needs met by somebody who wants to hurt the company is to allow them to get their needs met by the company.
So we talked about the red flag to recognize insider or employees going rogue.
Yes.
You said like that if they complain,
Mm-hmm.
are there other signs that we missed or didn't talk about?
There are so many.
Signals or
One is, from a data point, is trying to get access to data that is outside the data that they're
oh,
supposed to access.
yes.
Um, if we will look at it, this is always my lens, is stealing the information or infiltrating the company, because that's what I did. So if I'm going to go to a company and I want to get a hold of certain data, let's say I don't know, the chemical recipe to a product that's coming out. Well, then I'm specifically looking for someone. I have two problems that I have to solve that I hope can come as close as possible. One is that person has access to the information that I need. That is critical. And then that person is suitable to actually work for me and keep it a secret that they're working for me, and that I can
Yeah.
control them throughout this process so that I can get the access and I can maintain that access. And so I can go at it from two different ways. I can find, let's say there's 10 people who have access to it. then I can look for the one that's the most suitable to betray the company and work with me. If that doesn't work, I can also take somebody who's the most suitable in the company and then try to get them access to it. And often the people who have the access are not known initially or are not suitable. And so in that case, what you're looking for is someone who is trying to get your employee that's trying to get the access to that when they shouldn't, when there's no plausible reason for them to do so.
Yeah. Then it's also, I mean, if they haven't done anything before, then it is very hard to detect for a company that they are doing something wrong. If they have been like working there for a long time and being good all of the time.
And I think at that point, you're really looking for micro deviations from behavior in the past, right? Just like the way that you tell if somebody's lying by establishing that baseline and looking for an outlier. If we look at, let's say, the TD Bank case where the individual, they just got sued or fined at $3.5 billion for allowing money laundering activity to happen within their bank. And it mostly boiled down to a few employees, one of whom actually worked in the anti-money laundering department.
No.
Right. That's the recruit with the good placement that we were talking about, right? Yeah. That's extraordinarily good placement in access for that person. But, the person that was at a branch level that was opening up bunches of corporate accounts for the money launderers and then issuing debit cards to them to use, it was abnormal behavior. They did not typically open up that many accounts in that time period. So there was an outlier in the behavior. We were talking about motivations of why people do this. It's been disclosed in the media that person was paid just under $50,000 in gift cards to move what I think was close to $750 million over the entire period of the scam.
They should have kept the money themselves.
I know, right? Aim higher, ask for more.
Yes. Right. What's happening?
And so, one of the things that's often a surprise for people is how little, especially in espionage, people get paid, even for betraying their country. You'd be surprised, well, maybe not you, but because you work in this field, but what somebody will do for $2,500 a month, just an egregious, again, because if you've gotten that person to work with you because of something more important than the money, that could be excitement of doing it. It could be they're trying to get revenge on the organization, that they work for. That's much more powerful. But I do think when you recruit somebody, especially in a bank, if they've never done anything wrong before, this is an easy way to think of it. If they haven't done anything wrong before, you need them to now. So there will be a behavior change that happens. They do have to do something at least a little bit different. And again, the more we're paying attention to what people are doing, the more likely we are to notice those changes.
Maybe because we talk now about transforming employees into insiders, what if there is like no one suitable? So you might change the job to getting someone in. So I'll change the topic now a bit to applicant fraud. Also in the white paper that you wrote for us, you said there's 3 different versions. So 3 different categories. You have the individual, the criminal, and the professional. So I guess we will stick to the professional now. How is this different from, maybe first of all you can explain the categories for the people who didn't read the article.
Sure.
And is it different from KYC fraud, and in what way? Where are they similar? Where are the biggest differences?
Yes. What a great question. So having someone on the inside, let's just use a bank as an example, can be done 2 ways. You get someone who already works there, or you put someone there. And there are 3 levels to that. One would be an individual trying to do this, get a job to hurt the company. 2 would be organized crime doing this. They do it quite often, specifically in money laundering, or they're trying to steal, corporate espionage. information. And then the third one being the professional, which is either someone like me, who is trained to go in, who's trained to go through the interview process, who understands very specifically how to get this job in the company and is getting help from a nation state level on how to get the job, whether that's, looking at the email traffic inside the company, reading exactly, what they're looking for in someone, analyzing all the successful recruits they've had in the past to look for what they had in common, creating the cover platform specifically to be the perfect hire. If it's not a professional intelligence officer, the other version of the professional would be a penetration agent, which would be somebody that we recruit and train specifically to go do this on our behalf. This is something, we saw Iran do with a bank in Canada a few years ago, where they actually had someone who had worked for the Iranian government who was trained. They came to the United States. They worked for a technology firm here, actually stole technology and sent it back to Iran. They got caught and they went for a very short prison sentence in the United States. They got out of prison, went to Canada, did a name change in Canada legally. It wasn't a spy thing. They just actually changed their name and then got a job at a bank. I won't say the name of the bank because I don't want to embarrass them. No. In the anti-money laundering department of the bank. So that's an example of a professional doing this.
Yes.
And when you have that much, what we would call backstopping and support from the government, it's just an amazingly huge advantage. If I have had my organization listening to the phone calls of this, I know the person I'm going to be interviewing with. I know we've had a psychologist analyze this person, from looking at their whole life for months. It would be extremely, extremely hard for an untrained person in HR or hiring to identify that I was there for a bad reason. Very hard.
So wait, you tap their phone calls and read their
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. For I had an extraordinary level of support in the job that I did. I had dozens and dozens of people whose sole job was to support me in my role. And, in the movies, the operations officer, the case officer, whoever had my job, they do everything by themselves. And, they're this extraordinary genius that comes up with all of these ideas operationally for themselves. Yeah. But that was not the case. One thing that we would get a lot of help with would be constructing what we refer to as a chance encounter or a perceived serendipitous encounter. We use this with banks a lot overseas. So if I was going to recruit somebody that worked high up in a bank, let's say, in a country that didn't like the United States very much, there would be months and months before I approached that person in public or wherever of other people, not me, listening to their phone calls, monitoring their interactions personally and professionally, reading their email, and coming up with a professional psychological profile and what we call a targeting package of how this person works. And I would have access to really valuable information. I'll give you a real world example of one of the people I was going to approach. We knew that they liked a specific book that was very rare. It was their favorite book that almost nobody had heard of. And we knew that every, let's say, Thursday after work, they went to happy hour at the same bar. And so knowing their entire psychological profile before I went and sat several seats down from when they typically sit. I took the book, which I had to read this book 2 or 3 times before. It was an extraordinarily boring book. It was not fun it was super long too. It took me forever. And so I sat there ahead of when they walked in, and they came in, they saw me reading this book at the bar top, and they walked up to me and first and said, wow, I've never met somebody that knew this book. That's crazy, and they created the encounter first. In intelligence, we call this the first person on the elevator trick. So if, Jill, if I'm following you and you're staying at a hotel while you're traveling, let's say you're staying on the 9th floor and I walk in and you are getting ready to go upstairs and you push floor 9 and I walk in after you and I say, oh, I'm going to the same floor. That's a little suspicious. Your guard might be up.
Yes.
But if I already know that and I get on the elevator first and you walk on and tell me I'm going to the 9th floor also, that's much less aggressive. And so we're always trying to get the person to approach us first because then they think it's their idea, right? That's what we refer to in psychology as the illusion of choice. It's another thing that mentalists and magicians use constantly in their trick, is to give the person they bring from the audience up the misunderstanding that they're making a choice themselves when in fact they're being steered towards making.
Some social engineer that I know who is doing also pen tests also told me that he uses that trick. I'm not sure if he figured it out like consciously or was taught, but he just stands in front of somewhere and looks very lost, and then the people approach him and ask him if they can help him. So it was their idea, right, to help him.
Yes. There's also ways, if you're going to make the encounter first, where it can be less aggressive and give you information when you're doing it. One trick that we use, that's also used by a con person, is the dropped money trick. So if somebody's sitting, let's use a bar again, at a hotel lobby bar, and they're sitting at a bar stool, what you do is you would palm money in your hand and hide it. Then you walk up and lean down next to their feet at the floor by the stool, and then produce the money and say, I'm sorry, I think you dropped, this money. It does a few things psychologically. One, if they take it, it tells you a lot about them.
Yes.
Two, you come across as being a very honest person initially because you could have kept it and you're giving it to them. And so if they take it, it wasn't their money. And what you've done is you've established a power dynamic based off of deception, which is that they are the liar and you're the one who tells the truth in their mind. So there are a lot of ways to do this. But the people who are the best at it do it in ways that are both unnoticeable and make the other person feel like it was their idea that they're interacting.
Yeah. So is that what you meant with to figure out how this person works, just something that this person likes? Or
sure, yeah.
How they, like, where they go to all the time, or are there other like psychological signs when you figured out how this person works?
Yes. So, what they like would come into play when we're talking about sharing interest, right? So once I know what somebody's interested in, I can be interested in it as well when we're doing that rapport building that we talked about. This is dangerous if you're not really interested in it, because it's hard to fake, especially with somebody who, if it's their passion, if you're going to say it's yours too, you should know a lot about it because they're going to know quite a bit about it. So you typically look for a shared passion that you actually enjoy, which is why as an intelligence officer, it's important to be somebody who has diverse interests so that you can do this. But aside from that, when you're assessing someone, one of the things that I personally like to look at is what their list of desires are and what, what's important to them. What are their priorities psychologically? In two ways. One, you want to assess what guides someone's behavior. And two, what they want you to think guides their behavior. Most people walk around constantly trying to control how they're perceived and how they come across to other people constantly. It's a huge burden on the human brain. People are constantly trying to get people to like them, to respect them, to desire them. And they mask what they truly desire because they think if they divulge that people will react negatively to them. So you have to get past that first layer and get down to what actually makes them tick. But you have to be conscious of it because you don't want to indicate that you see through the shield that they put up, not because it would make you look insightful, but because it would unnerve someone to do that to them. So you want to understand them, but then you also want to give them the impression that you're buying into who they want to be perceived as. And once you start giving someone that feeling of being seen, what you really want is to get somebody to the point of them thinking, wow, when I was interacting with her, she really gets me. She really understands me in a way that nobody else does. Because then the brain doesn't want you to take that away from them. That's like a treat to the brain, and it likes sitting in that spot. And so great manipulators will use this by saying, when you behave the way that I want, I reward the brain with this. And when you behave the way I don't want, I withhold it from the brain. And it becomes a chemical drug that the brain can get addicted to. And you can very easily influence somebody at that point.
And the professional insider, to come back to, because I think we made a loop a little bit. They use this. Probably they know about that.
Yes, and one of the things that's really important about the insiders and who's coaching the insider is to remember that these are not always moral people. Often they're not, and they're willing to use dirty tricks to manipulate people. And, one example of a dirty trick would be in psychology, the shame trigger. It's probably the most powerful thing that can be used to manipulate or control someone. And it's also one of the most dangerous things because if not used correctly, you can really undermine someone's psychological stability with it.
Do you mean like sextortion?
That could be one. Once you understand what somebody is ashamed of that they've done in their past or been a part of, that is one of the core emotional things that drives their behavior now. And if you're aware of it, can be used to control their behavior. Shame is one of the most toxic emotions in the world. And in order to defend against being taken advantage of, it's very important to understand what can make you feel ashamed or what triggers you to feel that way, and to avoid that at all costs.
We haven't actually talked about money laundering. Is there something that we can tell the listeners that they can spot, or something, I don't know, some techniques, or
Sure,
maybe better, whatever you can tell us about it?
Yeah, so money laundering is really, let's just look at the criminal act of it. It's really unique as far as crime goes because it's the only crime that isn't, it's one of the only crimes that isn't really a crime itself, right? So if you took your money that you earned legitimately and wanted to do all the things with it that a money launderer does, put it in an offshore account, layer it through you can do that. It's not illegal. Yeah. Money laundering that's illegal supports an underlying criminal activity like human trafficking or drug trafficking or something like that. And so money laundering is broken into 3 phases. Placement, which is how you get the money into the financial system. That can be done, historically through smurfing, which is where somebody takes cash in small amounts into a bank or large amounts. In the TD Bank scandal, it was $1 million a day at one point in a duffel bag. But you try to get it into the system. That can also be done with like a cash-based business. bars
Yes.
have been used for this historically.
Yeah, I'm always wondering. There's like some restaurant where I can only pay in cash. Do you think they are money laundering?
The
Or is
reasons
it just
for only taking
something else?
cash are getting less and less legitimate for businesses.
Right?
Um, you know, not to get on to something off track. Strip clubs have been used for this historically. There's a lot of cash. What you're looking for is a business to where you can't prove what the sales amount is, which strip clubs and even OnlyFans has become an electronic version of this for money laundering,
Oh,
because the value becomes subjective. So the most important word in money laundering is value. It's not about moving money. It's about transferring value from one place to another. And that doesn't have to be money, but you want to move money through something where it's the value is subjective. That's why art has historically been something that is really big for money laundering, because I can say what I think a painting is worth. I can spend $50 million on a Banksy thing. If it's an NFT in cryptocurrency, that's a monkey, that's drooling. What we saw with
yeah.
not too long ago, people were spending millions and millions of dollars on this because the value is subjective. If I'm trying to launder money through, let's say, bananas that are being shipped, from one place to another, it's hard to say that bananas worth $20,000 a piece. So you're
Yeah.
always looking for that subjective thing. So once you get the money into the system, then you have to layer it, which is basically just distancing it from the original source of the money. And that can be done in countless different ways. But the goal is that by the end of that process, it's impossible for somebody to forensically trace where the money started. Intelligence
Mhm.
agencies do this quite often for what we would call a covert finance operation, where if we want, let's say I was going to buy something in, let's pick a country that won't upset anybody, North Korea, and I don't want them to know that the money came from the United States government. I can't just whip out a credit card that says U.S. Treasury on it, right? So I have to make
Mhm.
that money that started, let's say, at the U.S. Treasury, not be able to be traced back. So that would be the layering process. And then the integration process, which is last, is actually spending it. Where do you put the money at the end? How does Pablo Escobar actually spend all of his ill-gotten gains from?
Yes. That's when someday someone in the office suddenly comes with a Ferrari
Right,
and everyone is like, what happened?
right, yeah. The Ferrari is a good
I
example.
didn't.
Yeah, so like Ryan Wedding, the Canadian Olympian who ended up trafficking narcotics for the Los Chapitas faction of the Sinaloa cartel. And he was moving up to, I think it was, ooh, at a street value over $1 billion once it was sold per year. He probably made about 108 to $110 million a year himself, and he had hundreds and hundreds of motorcycles that were bought just to launder the money with. He never rode. They were,
Uh-huh.
very valuable. He had cars that were used to launder the money. But yeah, the last phase is how do you spend it? Because
Mhm.
criminal activity usually, unless it's a crime of passion, is about making money. So the point is to get it to a place where you can
Yeah.
actually spend it. And the ways to do it are just so many. I've even seen it done with trash being mispurposed as art, where people held a private art auction
Oh.
and they used trash, like literally like cartons from milk and things like that, and said it was this avant-garde art. And they had people bid on it and bid, a couple $1 million on this piece of art.
So
Yeah.
nice.
Maybe let's switch to the banking sector again. Is it the banking's AML software like actually catching financial fraud, or is it just like checking boxes? Like, is it just there to prevent banks from getting fines, or is it truly working? And if it isn't, then what is working?
It's a very complex question, and I'm going to be a diplomat with my answer and not anger every AI anti-money laundering software provider in the world. But I will say this. Money laundering was supposed to go down once AI came in to save the day, and it has gone up. Mm-hmm. Does the software-based approach catch people who are moving money illicitly? Absolutely. It catches the dumb ones. It catches people who are unaware of how the software works. And it catches people who don't recruit the people who manage the software. If you put something like that into place at a bank, and I simply recruit the person whose job it is to run that system and to pass what the system flags on, then you've negated the efficiency of the system pretty quickly. The systems are typically based on observing transaction typologies that look like money laundering. And the inherent problem with that is it's typically based on what money laundering patterns up to that point look like. That's what it looks for. And so it doesn't catch innovation in money laundering, which money launderers are some of the most innovative criminals in the world. And it doesn't catch, what would essentially be the money laundering version of a 0 day, right? It doesn't understand something it's never seen before. And so by staying innovative, money launderers will always stay ahead of software-based solutions to catch them. I'm not saying we shouldn't use it. We should still catch all the people that can be caught with it. But I think switching over to understanding how people recruit insiders in the banks to obfuscate and understand these systems. And even AI now can be a solution for criminals against this, where you essentially have an AI against AI, where it looks for what are the most successful banking applications or loan applications that go through the bank, and then it mimics it, right? And so there are ways around it. I will say that, Stephanie.
And with AI, they get more. Even the dumb ones get more intelligent, probably now.
They do, and AI has super surged the sophistication level of criminals. Specifically, if we talk about those targeting packages that I would get before I would approach people, AI can do this at scale based on people's online activity now. What used to take months of people supporting me coming up with this can be done in a day. Because of how much information is out there about us. And so it's allowed criminals to use the same techniques that used to be only done by countries and intelligence services to make these approaches, because they just have access to what, so much information that's relevant that you used to have an NSA or a GCHQ type organization to gather. It's not necessary anymore. Now criminals can do what we do.
When I was in the fraud analytics, it was exactly the same. We always said, it's like cat and mouse. It's always the scammer, the fraudster is always one step ahead. And we build the rules after we see the first time one fraud pattern. Afterwards, we can build the rules. Before, we can not really see whatever they're gonna think out. And now what you're saying is like the software will not save the days, for example. No. What do you think will, or is there like another approach, or the human side that you mentioned?
I think the human side is two-pronged. One, like we've already discussed, make it less likely that your employees will become part of these types of things. And, make your organization the hardest one to recruit people in. Money launderers and criminals are opportunists, and they want the easiest way to get it done and the least likely chance of getting caught. So make your organization the most likely chance somebody will get caught and the hardest way to break in. Besides that, I think it's very important for financial institutions or companies to understand the psychology of how the people who are trying to come hurt them think, and to understand how money launderers actually think. Then you can start predicting what types of innovations they will make. If you look at emerging technology now, it's very easy from somebody who's laundered money to predict how that technology will be used to launder money, and how, based off of changes, regulatory changes that are coming out, what they'll switch to, because it's what I would have done. And I think that there's a massive gap right now for financial institutions in understanding, if they were on the other side of the table, how would they think? And there's no predictive analysis on what's coming up. It's all, like you said, Jill, reactionary based on what they've already seen.
You provide this training, right?
I do. I consult with companies and banks on how to do that. I actually, this was wild. I thought after I came public with, after my cover was blown and I became public talking, I thought, I don't know how people are going to respond to me. And one of the surprises was that I had a lot of people who are leaving prison now reach out to me, specifically people who used to launder money, who want to turn their life around or, apply their knowledge in other ways now. And so I keep my foot on the pulse of what the innovations are. And I get to talk to a lot of people who are actually on the criminal side of the table, who often have these very, I don't want to say insulting, but interesting opinions about financial institutions right now as being easy to manipulate and easy to take advantage of. I don't hear, unfortunately, many people on the criminal side saying it's gotten a lot harder lately. I don't hear that very often. Okay. I hear that it's just as easy as it always was.
It's sad.
It is sad, yeah.
You mentioned this focus on the humans. It's also my what I do daily, and I agree so very much. But I don't see as well, as you say, the progress. The most companies are like, why should we invest in this? We don't see this the I don't know, the whatever comes out of it, because it's not really measurable, or like the culture, it's just so, if the people seen, they are just numbers kind of in a company often.
That's right.
Well, there are other examples, but a lot of companies are more like very economically driven. So do you see any solution to this or some approach?
Well, I think one of the first steps that companies need to take that makes them very vulnerable, that everyone in fraud, every criminal in the world, every manipulator in the world is happy that they have, is this "it won't happen to me" attitude. That always happens to other people and not to me. That hubris that people have for that makes them extremely vulnerable. And if people want to put metrics to it, well, avoiding loss is a metric. Getting fined a few $1 billion as a financial institution is a metric. And, banks and financial institutions have a really interesting relationship with money laundering. And that is because when the money is in the bank, it helps them. Right? They get to use the money. That's how banks make money, is based off the deposits in the bank and their investment of those deposits. And so that's not really at core something that is a negative to them. Getting caught harboring that money and getting fined more than they made off of it is a negative for them. And so you have to get past that hump of, our goal isn't to try to take as much money out of your bank as possible. The goal is try to, from both a moral and an economic standpoint, diminish the risk that is inherent to the financial institution for wittingly or unwittingly harboring the proceeds of horrible crime. And I think that there is a huge win by being an institution that is proactive about saying we care about this, and that we're trying to do the right thing, and that at the end of the day, you will make more money as a result of it and diminish your risk of these fines are growing. And it is specifically, the fines are getting so big because, European and Western law enforcement organizations became aware of the fact that too many banks said, we'll make more money off of it while we have it than we get fined. And they're going to change that. They're going to make it to where the upside isn't there anymore.
Yeah, and probably they just ignore that there are actual really bad crimes behind it.
Absolutely.
Like people trafficking and
I saw that with the Panama Papers.
Don't know it. What's that?
So the Panama Papers was one of the first, big exposures where the world became aware of what money laundering actually was. It was, all these offshore legal structures, specifically in Panama at the time, that were harboring money that was from tax evasion all the way to terrorism. And these law firms had clients that ranged from royalty, in Europe that were trying to hide money, politicians that were hiding money, to the Bin Laden family. And they used the same mechanisms to either avoid taxes, offload their wealth, or conduct these things. And one massive, massive risk that exists right now that I think a lot of financial institutions haven't wrapped their head around is how prevalent the proceeds of the Mexican drug trafficking organization's money is in both, not just financial institutions, but in large corporations that are being used to move this money. And based on the United States redesignating Mexican cartels as terrorist organizations instead of criminal organizations, I don't think a lot of financial institutions know the difference in what that means for their money. Now it's not just crime. Now the money that's transiting that network can be labeled by the United States government as material support to terrorism, which is a much different story.
Yes.
And so I think it's very, very important for financial institutions to wake up a little bit and say, we're at risk from the international law enforcement community labeling us not as somebody that harbors drug money, but as somebody that is supporting terrorism. That's a big change.
Yeah, I think there's a major lack of awareness on especially that topic.
Yes.
Is it there already, or is it just starting?
No, people don't understand how much that has changed things. And, specifically, like, let's take cryptocurrency exchanges. These laws are changing. There's no more of the defense of saying, well, I didn't know what they were doing, on my platform.
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't know they were doing anything bad with it. It's now becoming the exchange or the financial institution's responsibility to know, as it should be, if they're doing this or not. And yeah, playing dumb is not going to work as well in the future as it has in the past.
Well, I think we could talk for hours more. Stephanie, have I forgot some questions, or do you still have something?
Yeah.
That
I think, as you said, I think we prepared like 50 more questions, and then we could still talk for hours.
Yeah.
That's up to you. I've got as much time as you need.
I think just maybe one last one to what to do in that direction. Could you maybe, do you have some suggestions for the everyday person in their daily life, where they can look for signs if they are manipulated, or just be aware of what if they can change something to protect themselves better from scams and crime?
Sure. I think on a personal level, to avoid being controlled, being manipulated, the first thing is to understand how you personally are individually controlled and manipulated. and what is unique to you. Understand what triggers you in that way. One of the most vulnerable character traits, I'll say, or behaviors for someone to be manipulated is to be a people pleaser. And the more concerned someone is with not letting other people be disappointed in them and making everybody around them happy or not, the more easily they're manipulated. So I would say the first thing is to realize that you have the right to question what people are trying to get you to do. And that's not rude for you to try to understand more or to ask probing questions or to gain more information about the interaction that you're having with someone. And if they try to make you feel like you're wrong for doing that, that should be a major red flag to you. And another red flag from the personal side is that when people are trying to manipulate you or lie to you, they're trying to sell you something. They're trying to sell you a lie that doesn't exist. And so look for behaviors that indicate someone is trying to sell you in a physical way that can relate to typically when somebody lies, they will hold eye contact a little bit longer after the lie than the truth. And that's because they're trying to watch to observe if you bought it. Did you buy what I was selling there? So they'll maintain eye contact a little bit more. It's not always the case. Everybody's different. But ask yourself, in my interactions with people who are asking me for money or asking me for anything, are they trying to sell me something? And is what they're trying to sell actually align with what we're talking about?
So it helps to know yourself.
Yes.
Very much then.
Yes. You have to understand what your brain does well, what it does badly, and understand that when somebody is probing those things that it does badly, there's a reason for that. There's a reason. And if you feel rushed to make a decision, ask yourself, is there any logical reason why I would feel this sense of urgency for what I'm being asked to do? Or can I really take some time, think about this, maybe ask somebody else's opinion before I just act on my own? Why do I feel pressured? Pressure is the enemy, and understanding and knowledge is your ally in this. The more you know, the less likely it is that somebody will take advantage of you.
Oh, that's so nice you say this, because I always say that too. Maybe you're trying to.
That's
no,
it.
I don't know.
We're the same, Jill. Yeah, we think the same, Jill.
No, Matt, thank you so much. It was really interesting.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure talking with you both.